But on that note, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about some older players now. We're just talking about a couple rookies. We're going to shift over to Haason Reddick. Haason Reddick, Temple University legend. We love you. Philly still loves Haason Reddick. I'm speaking for Philly right now. If anyone in Philly disagrees with me, that sucks because Philly misses Haason Reddick. I miss Haason Reddick. And he was traded to the Jets for a 2026 third round pick. So it's also a conditional pick, which could become a second, but that's not the topic at hand. So he gets traded to the Jets, and he's looking for a new contract. Jets knew that going into it, but I didn't think they expected to be stuck in this stalemate going into week 3 of the preseason. And he's threatening to hold out. And I honestly could see a situation pan out where he doesn't play at all this season and just sits the whole year. So I was wondering what you thought about the Haason Reddick situation going on in East Rutherford.
I think the holdout is very possible. I would be kind of surprised for a 29-year-old edge rusher, one of the best in the league, to do that at this point in his career. The situation is super unfortunate. I think it's a bad look for both of them at the end of the day. I'm very unimpressed with the Jets front office in diagnosing this situation and moving forward. They kind of need Haason Reddick, like bad. Robert Saleh, since his time with the 49ers, he brought over to the Jets. He utilizes a deep edge rotation, and without Haason Reddick, they don't have that caliber of player on the defensive line that you can constantly rotate in and out on the edge. It's slightly concerning if I was a Jets fan from a personnel standpoint. You have Will McDonald, who is looking to step into a starting role for the first time in his career. And you have Jermaine Johnson, who is also looking to do the same. He started playing more last year. He's pretty solid in that role, but it's a super important part of his defense. And Haason Reddick has been super efficient rushing the quarterback his last 4 years of his career after a slow start, kind of figuring out what position he was really playing. 12 and a half sacks with Arizona, 11 sacks with Carolina, 16 sacks with Jonathan Gannon and Philly in 2022, and 11 sacks this past season, only playing 74% of the snaps. Haason Reddick is one of the most efficient pass rushers in the league. He still has juice off the edge. He is in the last year of his $45 million deal he signed with Philly. I expect this to end with him not playing for the Jets ever.
I agree. I don't think he's ever going to put on that uniform. And another thing that I wanted to just throw in there, Jets just lost Huff, who was, a very good linebacker as well, who just signed with the Eagles. Kind of, it almost like is like an addition to the trade. I feel like it's an important piece of
Absolutely.
context to give
Yeah.
that he just signed with the Eagles. Eagles replace Haason Reddick pretty well. Of course, they kind of play different roles as far as how often they're used and the amount of snaps that they play. But I think Huff will transition perfectly. I think Vic Fangio will know how to use him. And it just puts a little more pressure onto the Jets. And right now, the Jets are in a spot where they are the laughing stock of the league because of how this is played out. You trade for a guy, you give up a third, maybe second round pick in 2026, and you can't even get him to suit up. In addition, you just lost your other edge rusher to the team that you just got this one from. It just is. It's a bad look for the Jets. I agree. It would be really bad for Haason Reddick to not play this year. Especially given his age, your prime is only so long. So to kind of put a big year like this in jeopardy, it could be concerning the deeper into the season that we go.
I'm intrigued to see how long this ends up playing out because we've gotten hints of holdouts and significant
Mm-hmm.
ones throughout the league. I think it's more common with offensive players. I think that's kind of a given.
Yeah,
Um, I have some potential landing spots for Haason Reddick. This could be via trade. This could be via just free agency if they release
yeah,
him.
yeah.
Um, my number one landing spot is the Cardinals. The Jonathan Gannon connection is too much for me. and the Cardinals are deficient on the edge in a bad way. They just lost second-year player B.J. Ojolari for the year. He was solid in his role last year, and they're expecting him to take a jump. They have holes on their team that they're anticipating a jump in production from young talent that they brought in. And I think the pairing is too good. I think the Cardinals are better than a lot of people are giving them credit for, and they can compete now. And I think pressure is a super important part of that. Their front is not great, especially on the edge. I think pairing him with Jonathan Gannon once again would be a super smart move for Arizona. I would like it a lot. And I think they could compete for that division. Maybe not win it, but maybe for a wild card spot. They're
Definitely
pretty
one
good
of the
team.
toughest divisions in the entire league, top to bottom.
Absolutely.
Everybody can compete week in, week out. And I mean, we both know, there's been talks about Haason Reddick maybe coming back to Philly from Philly. He went to Temple, drafted in Philly. It kind of makes sense, but it kind of doesn't. At this point, Philly doesn't really need him too much. And, they got the replacement in Huff. And it might not even make sense for him. You know, it, you wanted, he didn't really want out of Philly that much. He just wanted a restructured contract. Whereas, in New York, he wants to leave. So I think you're right. I think with Gannon, he was there for the Super Bowl run. And I think they match up perfectly. He knows how to use him. He knows how he plays. The familiarity is just that trumps almost anything. But you had a couple more teams, so I wanted to hear about.
My next one on the list was the Bears. I think this one's kind of a given. They've been shopping around for edge help since they traded for Montez Sweat. They got some young interior defensive linemen. Gervon Dexter's looked really good for them. We know how efficient Sweat was last year. They still need that other edge spot bad. I'm not sure if this would be. I think they would probably put value out on the line to get Reddick. I think they would trade for him if they could. They were obviously involved in the Matt Judon sweepstakes, and ultimately he picked Atlanta over Chicago. Chicago is a really talented team, and they're looking really good right now. And pairing another very productive edge with Montez Sweat on that front would make Chicago a very scary team. Third team, other team that made a lot of sense to me, maybe not cap-wise, you'd kind of have to work out some things here, but the Ravens are also lacking edge depth and higher-end talent there. The Ravens do it every year. They bring in veteran guys, and they utilize them. They produce Kyle Van Noy, Jadeveon Clowney, older veterans, washed up considered by many people.
Some would say.
Yeah, and they're productive. Kyle Van Noy had like 9 sacks last year. I think Jadeveon Clowney was around there as well. They're pretty light on edge depth. They're very young there as well. Haason Reddick in that group with Justin Madubuike and the other interior defensive linemen. I think he fits pretty well there. I think they could use the help.
Those are my top three. I think it would be a good fit with him in the Ravens too, because of course, Philly has been a contender, but in a similar way, just different conference. Baltimore has been a pretty consistent contender. I think if you have when you have Lamar Jackson throwing the football, you're a contender.
I think that's one of the most important things of this as well. He's not going to a bad team.
Exactly, which the Jets, tough to gauge because of Aaron Rodgers' injury last year. Could be a contender, or they could just completely flop.
Right.
It's tough to call, but I really like your list. And you mentioned Atlanta with Judon. So he was just traded from the Patriots to the Falcons. The Patriots got a 2025 third rounder, and Atlanta got Judon, who had 4 sacks in 2023. But before that, he recorded 12.5 sacks in 2021 and 15.5 in 2022. Very productive player, very talented, and I think will have an impact in Atlanta.
I saw a stat. Well documented, Atlanta's pass rush has been the last couple years because of how historically bad it has been. They had 39 sacks in that 21 to 22 stretch. Judon had 28. So the juice is needed, the
Uh huh.
production is needed. I am a huge fan of Atlanta's front seven right now. You bring in Judon. You still have Arnold Ebiketie, who was a second round pick a couple years ago. You still have Zach Harrison, who was your third round pick this before this previous draft. You drafted, you invested heavily after you picked Michael Penix. You invested heavily in the defensive line with Aruka Rororo and Brandon Dorless, who I think will be super productive players. You still have Grady Jarrett in the room. They needed help on the front seven. They found it. I think as a group, the front seven looks much improved, and the defense looks good. They also signed Justin Simmons, which I know is not Matt Judon, different
Hmm.
position group, but former All Pro, pretty significant. They have star power on defense. You need pass rush to make your defense go, and they finally have some juice on the edge.
And I think it could give them, a sliver of a chance in the NFC South because that's such an interesting division to me because it's like no one in the NFC South to me is a true championship contender,
Yeah, no way.
but someone's got to go to the playoffs.
Right.
So I think it could be competitive, almost in the way the AFC North is competitive, where like you don't have to be the best. You don't have to be a juggernaut, but if you stay in contention for the division, you know,
Right.
come week 16, 17, you could be looking at an interesting scenario.
100%. I don't think any of these teams in that division are good enough to run away with it. In an ideal world, I think the Falcons probably do. I think from a roster construction standpoint, they are ahead of Tampa Bay. They are ahead of the Panthers. The Saints are pretty far behind at this point, in my opinion. Uh, I like what Carolina did actually. Not to get off track here, but they're
Yeah,
they're investing in Bryce Young. I like the foundation they built there. Dave Canales coming in from Tampa Bay, trying to fix Bryce Young. Not that he's broken, but his situation was broken. Um,
yeah.
I'm kind of excited for Carolina. They kind of look like a fun team. I'd look out for them honestly to push Atlanta a little bit and Tampa Bay.